couple of weeks ago, a report came out from Pew Research Center. Some of you might have seen this, probably not, but it was reported in a number of places about the new largest cohort group in the country that identify themselves as nuns. And Pew looked at how people identify themselves religiously, and the nuns have been studied for a good while now, those who have no religious affiliation at all. And it, of course, nuns, that name is sort of a play on words. They have no connections at all to any religious organization. And they comprise 28% of U.S. adults. That's a substantial group of people compared to Protestants at 26% and Catholics at 23%. So they now have eclipsed them. If you look at this chart here, I don't know how well you can see that, but certainly you can see the line. And the line, while it fluctuates a little bit year to year since 2007, has headed in one direction. Mainly, it's just increased, the group of people in our country who are religiously unaffiliated. That's noticing some changes that have taken place religiously in our country. Now, if you dig a little deeper and start finding out about the nuns, who they are, how they describe themselves, what they believe, 17% of them describe themselves as atheists. They don't believe in God or anything spiritually. 20% identify themselves as agnostics, which means, that, well, we don't know. Is there a God? Well, maybe not. Who can say? We just don't know. Strikingly, though, the majority of the nuns, 63%, identify themselves as nothing in particular. Nothing in particular. What a way to describe yourself, right? Nothing in particular. What are your views? What are your beliefs? I don't have any. Some of them believe in God. Sure, we believe in God, but nothing in particular. What kind of a foundation is that? What kind of a framework does that kind of person have for understanding the purpose of life? What kind of a moral framework does a person like that have? Or they just really don't have any convictions about anything, just nothing in particular. Nothing in particular. Organized religion has come under criticism for most of my life. I can remember dealing with some of this kind of stuff when I was a teenager, and noticing this trend where people, they didn't want to be religious, they wanted to be spiritual. And you saw this shift starting to take place in the dynamic of the culture. What I want to talk to you today is not so much getting into the details of this research, but to talk to you about the importance of the church. Some of the nuns, they may believe in God. It may be okay if you attend a church or a part of organized religion. It's just that they don't. Why does the church matter? Why do we need an organized structure within religion? Why does that make a difference? Now, if you're here today, you most likely don't identify yourself as a nun. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. Yet, as Christians, sometimes some Christians struggle to really understand and appreciate the value of the church. Maybe a younger person just doesn't understand why if there's a basketball game on Wednesday night that mom and dad say you have to leave early because we have Bible study on Wednesday night. They don't understand that. They just want to play ball. Do we understand the value of the church? I want to remind you about the importance of the church as we would try to grow in our love, appreciation, and participation in the church. The Bible describes the church as the family of God. That's how it's characterized. It's not some monolith. It's not some cold authoritarian sort of a thing. It's described as the family of God. Do you believe in God? Well, I believe in God. Well, God has a family. God has a family. Are you part of His family? Do you want to be part of His family? If you are, then how would you describe your part in His family? We're not going to look at each of these texts, but there's a number of places in the Bible that bring this relationship to mind. In Mark chapter 3, Brother Jack has taught this here recently, where Jesus asked the question, who is my family? Who is my family? His biological family had come to try to take him home. They say, hey, your family's here, they want to talk to you. And he says, well, who is my family? Who's my mother, my brother, and my sisters? Who are they? Jesus answers the question. He says, those who do the will of my Father. Those who do the will of God, they become part of the family of God. In Ephesians chapter 3, Paul explains how the church is the family or the household of God. In 1 Timothy 3 and verse 15, he uses the same expression. That's characterizing the church as a certain kind of relationship. When we think about relationships, our family relationships are the closest relationships we have. The affection and bond of love is strong within the family. Our family's not like our neighbors. Our family's not like our co-workers. Our family's not like our classmates. Our family's different. We view them differently. We appreciate them. We value them. We sacrifice for them. We serve them. Love is first experienced in the family. It's no wonder. It's no wonder why God would express His church in terms of His family. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we're not supposed to isolate or distance ourselves from the family of God. As a member of a family, then I have a role to fill. I have a part to play. I have something to offer, something to give, something to serve. I'm to love and care for my brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm to honor and to submit to God, my Father. I am to admire and follow after the example of Jesus, who is described as our older brother. Rather than isolating ourselves, distancing ourselves, or thinking that the church doesn't really matter, you can take it or leave it, we're to treasure the church as we would treasure our own families. Now, building on this idea of the church being the family of God, then we find that the church gives support to Christians. The church provides support to one another. God, in His infinite wisdom that incidentally is expressed through the church. That's Ephesians 3. His wisdom is known, recognizing the fact that there's strength to be gained through a group rather than being on our own, isolated by ourselves. It's interesting thinking about our culture and how you would characterize our culture. It's incredible. It's incredible how people feel isolated and lonely and are anxious, and depression is on the rise. I wonder why that's the case. Why do people feel that way? I wonder if becoming part of the family of God and participating in the church, if those kinds of personal struggles would be eased, be helped. From the very beginning of very, very early days of the church, you find people in Jerusalem who they obeyed the gospel and they begin to take care of each other. Christians take care of Christians. There's an interesting dynamic going on in those opening chapters of the book of Acts, because most of the Christians who had obeyed the gospel in Jerusalem, they weren't from Jerusalem. They had traveled there to observe Pentecost. But as they obeyed the gospel, they didn't just go home, they stayed there, and because they stayed there, they needed to be taken care of. There's the daily necessities that they needed to be provided for. Well, who was going to take care of them? Well, the local Christians there And they took care of one another in a surprising way. Some of them were selling their assets. Selling their assets to see to it that these brothers and sisters that they had, new brothers and sisters, could be taken care of. We're introduced to a man named Joseph who did that. And he brings the money from the proceeds of the sale of his property, and he gives it to the apostles so the apostles could give it out and use it as it was needed. The apostles were so shocked that this man did this. They gave him a new name. They called him Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. What Barnabas did there was a greatly encouraging act. You'd say that's the kind of thing that family does. And you see that being displayed from the very beginning. In chapter 4, the family of God is characterized in this fashion. Now the full member of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one said that any of the things that belonged to him was his own, but they had everything in common. You ought to be overwhelmed by the kind of love you read about in the Scriptures among God's family. That's the kind of love, incidentally, that is transforming. That we need to lay hold of that kind of love in our hearts so that we would take care of one another when opportunities are presented for us to do that. But in addition to taking care of the daily necessities of life, the church also seeks to encourage spirituality. It seeks to encourage the faith of believers. You know, believers can become weak over time. Believers are not exempt from the hard things, the darker sides of life. They go through hardships that test what they believe. Well, the church is to strengthen the faith of believers, especially in those times. How is the church to strengthen the faith of Christians? Well, mainly through our worship. Through our worship. Group worship. In-person worship. Perhaps because of the things we've gone through in recent years, we've come to understand the value of that in new ways, while some still struggle to learn the lessons of group worship, in-person worship. There's no substitute for it. There's no substitute for it. Our souls crave worship. They crave it. Again, the wisdom of God is expressed in the church and in the mission of the church and in the work of the church, what the church does as it seeks to praise the great works of God, all of which coalesce in the cross of His Son. Jesus, in Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount, He promised that those who hunger and thirst after righteousness would be filled. That's what the soul craves. The soul craves righteousness. That's what it needs. Where's it going to get that? Where's it going to receive that? Well, partly through congregational worship and teaching. Do you know that the church, the eldership of a church, their role is to see to the spiritual needs of the congregation. Their role is to feed the flock. That's the language that is used. They are as shepherds intended to feed the flock. What are they feeding them? They're providing them with what their soul craves. The question becomes for us is, are we willing to eat? Are we willing to eat? At my house, and it's probably this way at your house too. At my house, if you go to bed hungry, it's your own fault. Is that how it is at your house? Probably. Well, what about us as a church? Things are done to provide food for the soul. Are you hungry? Do you go away hungry? I mean, if you're hungry, if you don't deal with that, if you don't feed on God's Word, on the praises of God, you'll starve to death. You will starve to death. And you know what? It'll be your own fault. When the shepherds feed, when they provide food, if I go away hungry, maybe I don't even come to eat. Then that's on me. That's on me. Hebrews 10, verses 24 and 25, he says, and let us now consider to stir one another up to good works, to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day nearing. I mean, the Christians that this author is writing to, they're right on the edge. They were right on the edge. They were about to fall away. They're about to fall away. They're about to give up their faith. What was going on? Well, some of them, they weren't eating. They weren't eating. They weren't assembling. They weren't worshiping. They were not participating in the life of the church. If you don't participate in the life of the church, share in the life of the church, then what's going to happen to you? Now you're going to starve to death. So yes, the church matters. It matters. And our participation in it matters and makes all the difference in our growth and development. Thirdly, church matters because it's designed to support the truth in society. The truth is designed to support, the church is designed to support the truth in society. We have a mission. The church has a mission, right? It's not just designed to strengthen the faith of its membership. Its purpose is broader than that. There's an inward purpose and then there's an outward purpose. There is an outward-facing purpose. And we look around at our society today, and there's all kinds of problems. There's all kinds of lies that are being taught, promoted, embraced, lived. So what's our role? What's the role of the church in that? Well, the church is supposed to promote the truth. The truth. Did you know that there is truth in the world? That passage I mentioned a while ago in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verses 14 and 15, Paul describes the church as the household of God, which is the church of the living God, a pillar and buttress of the truth. Now we would look around our culture and we'd say, things are just shaking. The foundations are shaking. Now what do? How do we react? Well, what's going on in our day and age might be somewhat nuanced to us. Lies being promoted we never thought would be promoted before, but I mean the world has always bought into lies. The world has always been promoting lies. It's as old as the garden. In lies, as it turns out, the nature of a lie is that it's not obvious. It's deception. It's deception. What role does the church even have a role in the world today? Some people look around and think it's just the church is sort of an outdated construct. Perhaps there was a time when it seemed reasonable, but it's run its course. The church, in promoting the truth in the world, holds the world accountable. This is how Christ, as the head of the church, holds the world accountable. You know, Jesus described himself as the truth. It's how people, it's how societies, it's how government is held accountable by the church. Now, I know you won't hear much of that talked about. But that's how the Scriptures describe the role of the church in the world. In promoting the truth, it is lighting a path that leads to salvation, that leads to life, that leads to true freedom and justice. Peter asked the question in one of his letters in 2 Peter chapter 3 about, makes this point about we long for justice and righteousness. If we long for that, then we should seek to bring that to bear in our lives, in our world now. And that's, in part, the role of the church. We're to be a beacon of truth. We're not to compromise our teaching. We are not to participate in the lie. We're not to participate in the lie, but rather hold up the truth of Jesus Christ, do our best to live by it, and show the world the value of living by it. Ultimately, the church, why the church matters, why we need the church, is because the church will be saved. The church will be saved. That's what the Scriptures describe. The Scriptures lay out the promises of God. It shows forth what is in the future. And in the future, judgment is coming. Who will be saved in that is God's family. God's family is going to be saved. God's family is going to be spared. God's family is going to be united with Him eternally. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul begins he's writing about the consequences of Jesus having been raised from the dead. What does that mean? Well, it's a lengthy chapter. It means a lot. One of the points that he makes as to what the resurrection of Jesus Christ means is this. Then comes the end. Here's the future. The future has an end. Life in this world as you and I know it is going to come to an end. When He delivers the kingdom to God the Father after destroying every rule and every authority and power, for He must reign until He has put all His enemies under His feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. Now, if you believe Jesus was raised from the dead, here's what grows out of that truth. This is the future. The question is, are you going to be part of it? Are you going to be part of the kingdom? Are you going to be part of God's family, part of the church that is saved, that's delivered back over to God? Or are you going to be part of what's destroyed? What this language indicates, as elsewhere in Scripture, is that there is a battle that has been raging for a very long time. Humanity's caught in the middle of it. And the side that they choose has consequence. Because God is not going to allow it to just rage unendingly. That's what, in part, the resurrection of Jesus means. He and His people are going to be victorious. So the choice is us, or is ours, rather. The choice is ours to make. We can be part of His kingdom, or we can align ourselves with the elements, the powers of this world. That'll be brought to nothing. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we need the church. Now, the Apostle Paul, as I have mentioned earlier says that the church reveals the wisdom of God. On another occasion in Acts chapter 20, Paul explained how Jesus Christ bought the church with his blood. Therefore, we need to be warned. We need to be warned against treating the church with casual indifference. This notion of, you can take it or leave it, that's a dangerous perspective. The Father, the Son, and the Spirit do not look kindly on us when we make light and disparage the church. As Christians, we need to do better. Strive to do better in supporting our local church. We need to speak highly of our shepherds. We need to encourage our workers. We need to volunteer. We need to bring out the best in one another. We need to create a culture that reflects the character of Christ. That is how we demonstrate to the world the surpassing worth of Christ and His church. I appreciate your attention this morning. If you'd like to become part of the church today, you can be baptized into Christ, and He will add you to the church, just as He has been doing for believers since the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2. If you'd like to share in that life, share in that hope, the opportunity is yours if you'd come forward and make your request known as we stand and sing.